Welcome to the Financial Advisor Success Podcast, where you go behind the scenes with financial planner, speaker, and consultant Michael Kitces to hear stories of how leading financial advisors navigated the inevitable challenges that arise on the path to success and get insight from leading industry consultants about how to break through to the next level in your advisory business. And now here's your host, Michael Kitces.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 381st episode of the Financial Advisor Success Podcast. My guest on today's podcast is Ashley Quamme. Ashley is the founder of Beyond the Plan, a consulting firm based in Evans, Georgia that offers a fractional financial behavioral officer service, including consulting and training new advisory firms and even direct meeting support for new or existing clients. What's unique about Ashley, though, is how her background in psychology and couples therapy allows her to not only be able to help clients navigate their relationships with money, but also to help advisors get their clients unblocked so they can actually move forward and implement the advisor's financial planning recommendations to achieve the client's financial goals. In this episode, we talk in depth about how Ashley helps advisory firms figure out why their clients are getting stuck in their financial journey, and through an offering of advisor training and even direct client meeting support, guides clients through the necessary changes in behavior to achieve their own desired outcomes. How Ashley assists advisors with their own self-work in better knowing and understanding their own behaviors and biases and even potential blind spots that could otherwise result in certain types of clients being more challenging to work with. And how Ashley developed an office hours format for advisors to talk through particularly challenging client situations and receive structured feedback on how they might improve their approach with their most difficult clients. We also talk about how Ashley built on her experience as a couples therapist after hearing 20 to 25 clients a week come in for couples therapy that often ended up tying into a discussion of financial issues, to pursue and learn how certain therapy tools and techniques really could effectively translate to the world of financial advice. How Ashley uses the Klontz money script inventory and data points as building wealth assessments to help advisors' clients gain a better understanding of themselves through an analysis of their relationship and mindsets as it relates to money. And the way that Ashley introduces herself into advisors' client meetings to reduce any perceived awkwardness when joining the meeting and ensure that clients themselves feel well supported. And be certain to listen to the end, where Ashley shares the surprises and challenges she went through when she decided to launch her own consulting practice as an independent business owner to serve financial advisors, which unfortunately came right in the midst of the COVID pandemic. How surprised Ashley was when she realized the level of demand and support there is for financial behavioral services within the advisory industry. And the way that Ashley's focus and success shifted when she stopped trying to find her compass and figure out what was next after the first decade of her career and instead looked internally to figure out what she enjoyed doing and let that simply become her compass instead. And so with that introduction, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Financial Advisor Success Podcast with Ashley Quamme. Welcome, Ashley Quamme, to the Financial Advisor Success Podcast.
Thanks, Michael. It's good to be here.
I really appreciate you joining us today, and I'm looking forward to a discussion around what to me has been an interesting trend and shift in our world over, I guess, about the past 5 to 10 years, where we've been going from this world where, my value is I can bring alpha, I can lift your investment returns and get you better financial outcomes. That's where a lot of us were 10 and 20 plus years ago, into this realm that's both more about kind of the financial planning end of things. So I'm going to add holistic advice to you beyond just the portfolio. And what's been this sort of growing realm of talking about the behavioral side of what we do. And it seems to come from a lot of different directions. There's sort of a pure client communication aspect of having better conversations with clients. There are sort of the investment lens to this. I'm going to be a behavioral manager for my clients so they don't sell at the bottom and make really bad investment decisions because of all their behavioral biases. I find there's even just a pure financial planning aspect of, money is so intertwined in our lives and our identities and our decisions and what we do that it actually gets kind of hard sometimes to talk about money stuff without kind of having some parts of psychology crop up. A few firms I've seen in recent years have gone so far as to hire a financial counselor, like a financial therapist, to be on staff. Most firms aren't really big enough to do that as a full-time role. And so I know you kind of come to our advisor world with roots in marriage and family therapy and kind of the financial therapist end of the world. Now looking at a world of what does it mean to be like a behavioral officer for an advisory firm, or like a fractional financial behavior officer for a firm, since a lot of us can't afford to hire someone full time into this role. And so I'm really just like kind of curious and fascinated to learn like what exactly does it mean to be a fractional financial behavior officer, and how does that show up and interface with an advisory firm?
Yeah, it's a question that I'll be honest, like I'm also trying to figure out as well. I'm not yeah, I'm humble, I guess, enough to say that I don't have all the answers here as far as what this exactly looks like, but I'm figuring it out and learning from so many other great visionaries and trailblazers in this space. So it's an exciting time for me, shifting from purely a mental health side into, then into kind of a financial psychology, mental health, and now even more so into the financial services side.
So so tell us a little bit more about how it's shaping up so far. So you are doing this live in practice with a number of advisory firms. Like what does the scope of an engagement look like when you start working with an advisory firm? What do you do, Ashley?
Yeah. What
What
do I
do you do?
do? It's a actually that is kind of the question I grappled with. I was on a call with an advisor and he kind of asked, not maybe in the way that you and I were just kind of joking, bantering here, but he kind of was like, "What do you do? Like, what do you do?" And I remember I just said, like, I help firms go beyond the plan, and I help them, figure out and learn how their clients think, feel, and do money. And I was like, oh man, that was really good. Thank goodness I've got a note taker, an AI note taker here, because I
Well,
don't think I would remember that
okay, random tidbit. So What's
otherwise.
what's your AI note taker of choice? Because we're
It's
all
the
like still
it's
using
it's
that.
with Zoom. It's Fathom.
Okay,
Yeah,
Fathom
yeah, yeah, yeah,
integrated to Zoom. All right, so I
yeah.
so I like this I framing that you set up here. Like we help clients go beyond the plan. That does just resonate to me of okay, we did your financial plan. What comes next? Like what else do we do? And it's like, well, that's sort of the point. Like what comes next? I mean, I think for most of us, what comes beyond the plan is some version of, well, now you implement it. Like you made the plan and now you implement it. Except not all clients actually implement every recommendation we put in front of them. In fact, most of us have varying levels of struggle to get clients to actually do all the things that we put in front of them, which connects to me back to this. Well, because clients have a lot of varying levels of funky relationships with money, right? They think, feel, do in different ways, depending on a whole bunch of stuff about their life and background and upbringing and the journey that's brought them to our advisory office that day.
Yeah, absolutely, all of that. And there's a kind of like parallel there to how things can tend to work in therapy too. You've got these treatment goals, these objectives, this plan, if you will. What are we working on? What do we want to accomplish? Okay, great, we've identified it. Now we're stuck, or you're not implementing, right, these action items. Why are we getting stuck? Why is it difficult to make progress towards greater well-being, from a, if you want to say, a holistic place? It's fine. And so, coming into and working with firms, like, I view my role, I view the work that I do is really helping to figure that out. Why are clients getting stuck? Where are they getting stuck? What are aspects or things that they can be doing better? What can the advisor do better? What can the firm do better? All of that kind of tied into like one system. And so going beyond the plan really is, looking at, how can we move our clients, from just a place of here's this plan, as you said, now go take action, to really life well lived.
So so help me get a little bit more granular in just how this actually shows up in the work that you do with an advisory firm. 'Cause for what you're describing, I mean, I can envision everything from like training advisors in techniques to do this, or like literally just sitting with our clients that are really, really stuck and be like, I have no idea what to do. Actually, just figure it out. Let me know how it turns out. So like, what do you do when you get engaged into an advisory firm?
There's an onboarding kind of process here. I want to learn about the firm. How are they operating? What are their maybe initial kind of starting goals as far as where they're needing support or direction on? So, as you kind of mentioned, yeah, from if we're kind of naming out here kind of the aspects of work that I do, it's providing training. Whether it's webinars, seminars, they can be advisor training or client facing training. So I do offer, CFP continuing eds for those trainings that are identified. There's, looking at the firm onboarding process. What does your prospect meeting process look like? What does your, meeting look like? What are all of the meetings kind of in that initial onboarding? What do those look like, and how can we, you know, fine tune or shift those to create, the outcomes that you're wanting? How can we also help give clients an idea around what it'll be like to work with you, and that we're not just numbers focused? I say we because I really view myself number here, but how can we create, a different client experience from the get-go? Part of that may include, and one of the things I've really enjoyed are doing, what I call money mindset meetings. So implementing behavioral assessments. I use data points for those assessments. And so, implementing those assessments, conducting, facilitating a post interview, and really gaining clarity on who the client is, underneath the surface. I also do client meeting facilitation. So whether it's me facilitating the meeting without the advisor or co-facilitating the meeting with the advisor. Now, not every meeting, but, particular, identified meetings. And then, we also do office hours too, which, I've learned this the hard way. And this is so different, Michael, than how things work in mental health, that the word supervision is not, does not go over well. It does not land well on financial advisors. But, in the mental health space, one of the, really kind of core, kind of aspects of being a mental health practitioner is really getting ongoing supervision. So whether that's through your peers or through a mentor. And so, office hours is really kind of that place where we come together and talk about cases, collaborative.
So supervision in this context is not like making sure you're compliant. Supervision in this context is like getting feedback on
Correct.
your technique and what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to change the wording on that early on because I got some feedback that was like, whoa,
Yeah, just
whoa,
I'll admit,
whoa.
although I find even beyond that, like it is an interesting phenomenon that I know a lot of the world of counseling and therapy has a very heavy component of, as you're framing supervision, like just I kind of think about it, like putting yourself in a position where you are getting structured feedback because someone actually sees some of your work and tells you what you're doing, gives you feedback, or role plays your work and then gives you feedback about how you did. And it's always struck me because just the few times I have ever seen those techniques like applied or tried to applied in the advisor context, like, boy, most of us really hate role playing. Like if you just
Yeah.
say, okay, everyone, now we're going to role play this, there's like at least an advisor conference, there's like a collective groan in the room. It's like, oh, I can't believe we're going to do this. Notwithstanding all the very good research out there that says like that's actually a remarkably effective training technique.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is. It's so fun. It's so fun. It's so interesting coming, it's a learning curve, as I'll probably share a lot. That's a learning curve. So not supervision. We're talking about feedback. And, the great thing too that, I feel inclined to also say is that there's an aspect here of case consultation, getting feedback that, sometimes we have our own blind spots, and sometimes our own stuff, like the self really is how we refer to it on the mental health side, the self of the therapist. Like there's a self aspect here to working with clients. We can have a blind spot too, and not realize. And so getting feedback from, peers or mentors can really shed some light to, if you are projecting, maybe potentially your own stuff onto client situations.
So the idea is like I come into an office hours and say, "Hey, I've been working with this client. Like I'm having a lot of difficulty because I'm, trying to get them to implement, and he's really dug in and doesn't seem to want to do any of the things we recommended, even though he hired us as an advisor. And like I can't figure out what's going on. Like, Ashley, can you help me figure this out?" Like that. Am I thinking about this right? Like that's the
You
kind of
are.
stuff I would be bringing to an office hours.
Absolutely. Yep, you are. Yeah, when, insert whatever problem there, there, yeah, that is what we dive in and talk about. Office hours seems to be a very, with the firms that I've been working with, a very, I don't want to say popular, but it is one that has been very well received and continues to get very positive feedback around, like, wow, this was really great. Like, I didn't think about it that way, or, just a lot of positive feedback and learning for myself too. So it's mutually as well.
So can you give us just an example? What's an advisor thing we deal with that someone brought to office hours and you had a like, well, here's the different way we look at this from the financial therapy end that is helpful then for an advisor to take back.
Yeah, I'll speak to a more recent one, and it was around financial enabling. And so for those that maybe not are not familiar with financial enabling, it is enabling a, maybe adult child or another family close, but enabling them in such a way of providing financial resources for them that are really to their detriment and also your detriment as well. It may not be financial, it could be emotionally, mentally,
Sure.
psychologically.
So our infamous like the client whose child is 33 years old and still lives in the house and still is completely financially dependent on them, uh and everyone says like, you need to get your son out, and they're like, yep, and then they continue to pay all of his
Correct.
bills. Okay.
Yep, very, very common one. So, that's a more recent example. And so, advisor, we've talked it through on just some strategies. And, one of the things that was interesting that came out of this one in particular, at least, was, the client, the, older adult client of the advisor was saying all these things about how the adult child wanted this money from their parent. And so there was a moment there in this conversation with the advisor where I asked, I said, have you, like, how does the mom know that this child wants that? Is that what the child is saying? And he kind of paused and was like, oh, I don't know. And I said, have you had a conversation with the adult child to see if it is in fact what she wants? And he's no. I said, well, let's create maybe kind of an action plan, obviously with permission from the client, of course. But let's talk about how maybe we can dispel any myths here around that may be at play or inaccurate narratives. I have found in my own work that sometimes clients will create these narratives. Oh, this person wants this. Oh, this person, I need to give this person, my kid money because if I don't, they'll XYZ ABC, or they're expecting it. Well, maybe they're not. Maybe that's an inaccurate narrative that you've created. And so
What
if we can
what
find
is
ways
it
to chip away.
what does it turn out to be instead? Like what
Yeah,
kinds of alternative
usually
narratives are we like not considering that we should have?
Yeah, usually in those cases, I try information from the horse's mouth. Like let's find out if that's actually true. Some clients aren't willing to go there for various reasons, maybe fear, uncertainty, lots of different, maybe reasons at play here. But, for some, once they do find out, like, oh, okay, they're not expecting me. In fact, they actually don't want me to give them, money to this extent because they feel guilty. They feel then obligated to, go on these vacations with me. don't need that money. Sometimes psychologically, at least speaking, when the older adult parent finds out that information, it can put them in that place of, well, what is my purpose? What purpose do I have then if it's not to provide or give to the extent I am financially to my, adult kids? So trying to chip away at that and finding out where the truth is, where the reality is, creates an opportunity then from a financial planning standpoint, coaching standpoint, therapy standpoint, to really get underneath the surface there and work to creating different patterns.
So I can see now sort of the context of office hours. So it just advisors bringing these kinds of, I think most of us would probably from just like sticky situations with with clients, and having someone to talk through the scenario with, that brings a different skill set and a different perspective than, just I'll say air quotes, like just talking to advisor peers, where I think a lot of us would, not necessarily have the tools, the approach that you articulated. I feel like the generic advisor response is like, well, you just got to cut them off. Come on.
Yeah, we call
I've done
that
the math.
stop
Like
it.
I can show you the financial projection. You are going to go broke if you keep doing this. So like, can I give you another chart that shows you how it goes to zero if you don't stop?
We call that usually stop it therapy in our field, some form of stop doing this, or just do this.
It works, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely worse. Saying that
Cool.
with sarcasm. I know the listeners can't see my face saying that with sarcasm.
So I understand the office hours a little bit more now. So take me back to, you'd also talked about client meeting facilitation. So is that a version of this same kind of conversation, but it's, yeah, Ashley, can you just have this conversation with them? Like, I'm not sure I know how, or I just don't really want to do this conversation. Like, is that what that means when you say client meeting facilitation, or does that show up a little bit differently?
No, I think that you are correct. And for those more, if you said sticky, and it's a great, I think, word kind of for it, for those super sticky maybe situations where the advisor, is unsure, or if there's, maybe a desire on the client end. One of the firms that I've been with, Experience Your Wealth, they, have had clients starting to even request for meetings to talk about some of these sticky situations with me, which is wonderful that clients are seeking out that type of resource. So it is the sticky situations, but it can also be, hey, just another set of ears. Like, this couple is a challenge, and they have really divergent perspectives around spending, and it's really causing a lot of issues. And so just having another set of ears that maybe listens for things in a different way than an advisor would can bring about perspective. It can bring about maybe additional areas of focus as well.
I'm just curious, like, how would you envision advisors trying to introduce that conversation with clients, to say like, here's Ashley and who she is and why we're going to have another person in our next meeting together, in a hopefully not awkward manner?
In a hopefully not awkward manner. I think the awkwardness is advisor dependent. But usually, how I would coach an advisor on that is, at this point, again, I said earlier, like, I view myself as a member of the team, as a team member. And so I think that, viewing me as a team member really allows you to use that kind of language when approaching clients. So, for example, hey, you know, Michael, we have this new team member who's come on board. Her name's Ashley Quamme, and she is our financial behavior officer. And her area of expertise is really in the, mindset piece, psychological piece, however you would frame it there. And, we've had her starting to come into our client meetings to observe or just ask other questions, and really get to know our clients. So it doesn't have to be this big, scary,
Okay.
awkward thing. Now, granted, I'm coming at it from a different place. I recognize my own bias here. Uh, I think if you can think about it in a way of it doesn't have to be that scary. In fact, to the best of my knowledge here, because I don't want to speak in absolutes, but to the best of my knowledge, I don't think that there has been a client that has said, "Oh God, that sounds like a terrible idea," or "Yeah, no, like definitely don't want that." And the response has actually been one of excitement, one of interest, one of intrigue. And think about it this from a client perspective, and this has worked out anytime that maybe I've done any kind of co-therapy or talked about, having another service provider kind of with me, is that you get two heads here, like two professional like heads that are sitting here thinking about you, dedicating, a whole hour to just you and helping you. That's usually a really attractive to
Yeah.
clients, to know like, wow, like all, from an ego standpoint,
Yeah.
like, wow, all these people, these service providers with different maybe professions and expertise, they're sitting here with me focused just on me. So most clients are generally have been very receptive and excited and welcoming of that.
Well, and I feel like it's worth acknowledging as well. I mean, for a lot of clients at these sort of this level of sticky situations, like when you say, I think it might be helpful to bring my colleague in to uh help with this conversation. It's probably not news to them that they've got some challenges.
Yeah, yeah,
I do feel like there's this piece worth recognizing that, like from the advisor end, this kind of maybe my own projection. Like I feel awkward or nervous about introducing this discussion to clients, but to be from the client end, like not news they've got difficulties. They may be in an advisor relationship with me in part because they've already been trying to figure out how to solve some of the challenges or the way it's showing up for them. So if I've got other experts on the team to bring into the room to help, like that's probably going to be very positive.
yeah, it is. And, one of the observations that myself and some of the other advisors that I've been working with is a sense of relief to kind of to what you're speaking about, some relief around, oh man, here is an expert in this area that maybe knows and could potentially help us with. Like there is a little bit of relief there on the client end.
So then you also mentioned, I think you called them money mindset meetings
Yeah.
that are also client facing, I think. So what are money mindset meetings and how is this different from some of the other things that we've been talking about?
The way in which I run them, or have been running them, is, I implement several assessments. So I use data points. There are behavioral assessments, and there are several in their system that I use. They take them prior to meeting together, and then we do like 45 to 60-minute kind of post assessment interview where I take the results of those assessments and I review them with the clients. I ask for any kind of clarifications and how maybe the results are landing on the client. From time to time, there might be some inaccuracies there, or the client views something different than how the result turned out. I should say is a better way of saying that. But I'll take all of that. I'll ask some history, and I'll take kind of the sum of all of that. I'll give the client back, like, based on what I'm seeing, here are a few areas of focus. If you or you guys choose, to focus on, these could really move the needle. So I'll give them some feedback there. But, then I also give feedback to the advisor, or the team that's working with the client. And I'll say, here are the results from these assessments. Here are results from the interview. This is, my perspective with regards to maybe certain areas that could be of challenge for them. Here are their strengths, certainly. And here are maybe some things, from a maybe personality standpoint to be mindful and watchful of. So all of that is, kind of what I call the money mindset interview.
So, so help me understand these assessments further. Like what is the assessment? What are the assessments that you actually use?
Yeah, so I use the Klontz Money Script Inventory, and that is, assessing those money beliefs. That is a very, a more popular one that's out there, and so that's going to look at the four different areas, four different money scripts, categories that a client or belief systems that a client may fall into. So I like to use that.
What are the for those that aren't familiar, like what are the money scripts, the four money scripts?
Sure. Yeah. We have money avoidance, which sounds a little bit kind of like the name. There is money status and money focus, and then money vigilance. Those are the four categories there. And so
So
usually there's
if I'm money avoidance, I avoid it. If I'm money status, like
your
fairly
focus.
self-explanatory, like money is my measure. So what's the difference between money status and money focus?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I explain money status as really the like that external
Okay.
view of how maybe wealth might be displayed. Uh, you may see that in like lifestyle creep. So
Okay.
clients, who are making, start making more money, making more income, but their spending also increases. They're, susceptible maybe to marketing, the keeping up with the
Uh-huh.
Joneses, right? Kind of
Yep.
mentality. I've got to have
Okay.
the latest, greatest. Money focus is really more of an internal, both are internal, I should say, but I like to think of money focus as maybe more of an internal, kind of view. So money is the source of happiness. If I have more money, then things will be better, then I will be happier. Workaholism can really fall kind of into this place, so needing to work more in order to make more, but that goalpost maybe is always moving. There's never really a sense of like contentment or enoughness. I don't know if enoughness is a word, but I just made it one. So that's really kind of the difference there between money focus and money status.
And then the last was money vigilance.
Money vigilance, yes. And so, kind of like it sounds, being vigilant around money, where it's allocated, how much is being spent. In theory, this sounds like a really great thing. And I will say that for the most
I was
part,
gonna say,
yes, it can be.
as a financial planner, like this sounds like the good one.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's great. But there's a downside to being too vigilant. And, advisors may see
Yeah.
this when clients go from the, accumulation phase to the withdrawal phase and they
Uh-huh.
don't spend anything.
Yeah.
Or they
Or
have
they're
that.
literally being constantly vigilant and like I get it. They retire and now they have spare time to look at the markets and I get a phone call every other day about what's
For
going on
sure.
because they're being very vigilant about what's going on with their portfolio. It's like chill out, go enjoy your
Yeah.
retirement.
Yeah. Or, I mean, and that's, to that point, like they don't enjoy the fruits of their labor. They don't, take that trip with their spouse or their family, or even invest like in their own maybe health from like a financial place. So I say in theory, it sounds really great, but there is a downside, there too.
So I am I wrong in interpreting like I feel like most of these have a negative tone and connotation to them. I mean, like, are all these meant to kind of like represent different kinds of dysfunctions around money? Like, could I have none of the four because I'm not struggling with any of these issues? Or is the idea like I am like everybody is one of the four, you just figure out which one you are?
Yeah, I've not seen anyone with a score of like zero for all four.
Okay. Well, humans got a human at some point.
Yeah, yeah, and these are a lot more like deep rooted beliefs. Like just from for example, like people who are wealthy are bad. Now, I know like that question, there's some criticism around like, well, it kind of boxes you into like an either or. And I get that, but there are certain beliefs that can come out of questions like what it is that you do believe around money, or how money is managed by you or by others. And so, I think that if anyone were to take it, again, I don't like to speak in absolutes, but I would find it very hard to believe that anyone would not at least show some kind of, maybe slight, you know, kind of preference there or score being at least higher, at least in one of the categories. So usually there's at least one or two dominant ones that come out.
I mean, I could certainly envision like how this becomes helpful going into a financial planning relationship, into an advice relationship. Like, yeah, it would be helpful to know going in if you've got like a huge focus on money status. That's definitely helpful to know going into the planning relationship, or even more like, okay, so he's a money status person and she's really money vigilant. Like, okay, I've got a sense as to how this marital dynamic's probably going and where some of the tension points are, just literally knowing that these are their money scripts and they have two different money scripts.
Yeah. And I'll use myself as an example. So when I've taken this, my money focus and money avoidance are my two highest scores. Now, research has shown that therapists tend to score higher in money avoidance. Shocker. Whereas financial planners, advisors, they score very high in money vigilance. My husband, he's a financial planner. And so when I took this, now granted, this was probably several years ago, my money focus and money avoidance were high. However, things have played out, at least in my marriage, quite differently. And so while I may have like a high degree of money focus, we don't have credit card debt. There's a behavioral component here, despite maybe what my beliefs or propensity might be. There's a way, and this is kind of the beauty of really a healthy marriage when couples are aligned on their vision, their goals. My money focus script, it doesn't dominate the relationship or our financial health.
So the idea is new clients coming on board. A step in my new client onboarding meeting might be Ashley's going to go through, give clients this assessment to understand what their money script is, talk to them about it a little bit, and then come back to me, come back to the firm and say like, so just so you know, like, right, whatever it's, he's a money status person. She's high on money vigilance. We talked about a little. Here's some other things that cropped up, and so now as the advisor, I've got more perspective on what this is going to be like as I get going with this clientele.
Correct. Yeah, that's it. And the other assessment too is the building wealth assessment, and that comes from a lot of the research from the Millionaire Next Door, which I would imagine most maybe listeners are familiar
I think
with that work. Maybe
I
a
think a
few.
lot of us are familiar with Millionaire Next Door, right? What was it? Prodigious accumulators of wealth. Uh, what's the building wealth assessment though? Like, what is that
Yeah,
doing
so
or looking
that
at?
that assessment is really looking at these six different areas, or wealth factors, is what they call it. So, for example, there's frugality, confidence, control, and control meaning not as your spouse control. It's looking at internal, external locus of control. There's planning and monitoring, focus, and then social indifference. And so these six really different wealth factors that they're looking at contribute to the potential for the client to be able to build wealth. And so clients will take this assessment as well. And, based on some of the results, I'll provide the client feedback, but also the advisor feedback as well. So if a client is really low in frugality and also very low, with the social indifference, like they're probably spending beyond their means. And so if that's an issue in their financial plan, like it can be helpful for advisors to know that up front.
So the first is frugality. So I kind of get that, right? Like either you are very frugally oriented or you are not. This tells me a lot from the advisory end about what it's going to be like. I feel like for a lot of us, I sort of suss that out because either A, I get to see something about your cash flow and spending and get some sense of this, or B, I feel like there's sort of an implication of if you were a saver and an accumulator and that's how you became my client, you probably are okay on the frugality end. But client couples sometimes have differences. So I get frugality. So you said the second one is confidence.
Confidence, correct.
To me, like,
Yes.
am I self-confident in general, or is this like a money confidence? I'm not sure
Yeah,
what money
it's
confidence means.
yeah, the confidence really in making kind of small and larger financial decisions, as well as the confidence in like their that being able to manage, kind of financial affairs. So, does the client feel confident in maybe their knowledge base? Maybe this, ties into a little bit of like financial literacy here. But how confident are they in their money related choices and ability to manage the financial details of their life?
The idea being, if my client has money confidence, they're probably going to take action and be decisive. And if they're low in money confidence, like, they're probably going to show up as procrastinators that don't want to take action because they're not confident in their actions.
Absolutely.
Like, is that
Yeah.
what I would expect to show up
For
based on the scores?
It is, yeah. Now, there might, going back to kind of the scripts, they may be those, maybe more money avoiders if they have a lower degree of confidence. Not
Right.
all, but there's maybe some likelihood there. The risk for, it might sound like kind of with money vigilance that you would want somebody that's high and confident, but again, too much of a good thing cannot be great. For clients who maybe are high in confidence, they could be overconfident. And
Well, I've
so you
never had
think like
clients like that.
Oh,
Really? That's a thing? Oh, must be everybody
it could
else's
be
clients.
overconfident. Those DIYers, maybe,
Yeah. Yep.
but overconfidence, overconfidence bias, right, kind of comes to mind here. But overconfidence can be really difficult for anyone, but certainly for advisors to work with as well.
So then control, I think, was the next one.
Yeah, control was that third one, and this, I jokingly say it's not asking you how controlling your partner is with money. This is looking at more internal forces versus external forces. So internal locus of control versus external locus of control. Do you feel like you internally drive your own financial success? Feel like your financial outcomes are a result of your own efforts, your own doing, or that they are a result of more external forces, such as winning the lottery, inheriting money, a financial windfall, if you will.
Okay, so I get it in this context, right? Clients in general, like clients that think they drive their own financial success and outcomes, probably much more likely to take action and do things because they literally believe it's going to achieve favorable results. If you're more externally focused on this and you think the only way anybody gets rich is winning the lottery, then either A, I have to literally talk you out of buying lottery tickets, or B, like, you may not be so enthused about the savings plan I'm trying to give you to achieve your retirement goals because you actually don't think it's going to work because your view is wealth accumulation comes from external factors, not from diligently saving in the first place.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So then I think you said the fourth was monitoring.
Yeah, planning and monitoring. So being able to set goals, being able to, plan out and monitor your income and expenses, right? Your basic kind of budgeting, being able to save, like kind of those foundational like
Okay.
aspects
Oh,
of
right,
it.
because this isn't literally about, like, are you going to be so I'm sort of struck, like, things like control confidence, I feel like speak to basically, are you going to be a good client that implements my recommendations, or are you going to be a problem client that we got to deal with?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but I just have to, like, this reminds, like, this isn't actually about like an assessment of, are you going to be a good cooperative client or not? This is an assessment of, are you someone who's likely to build and accumulate wealth in the first place. So yeah, if I'm frugal and I'm good at monitoring and planning, then I don't have bad spending behaviors and I'm pretty good at planning out my own budget, aka people who tend to accumulate dollars and save, which is the
Exactly.
point.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I have found that with regards to the planning and monitoring, that this score actually, when I go back to retest clients, that clients who are working with a financial advisor, that this score actually can increase as they are working with an advisor. So, from a value standpoint, this is something that planners, advisors, that they can really bring value, to clients, helping them become more disciplined with regards to this.
So then the next one I think you said was
Focus.
focus. Okay, so what's focus in this context? I mean, I know what the word is in general, but
Kind of what you might think of it is, do you succumb to distractions in your life, or is busyness like an excuse for not being able to get things done? And I want to be sensitive here to the fact that I know for maybe many families who are in a phase of life, like presently I am, who are raising kids, working families, like, yes, there's an aspect, but is
wait,
busyness
so like
really a distraction for
young
accomplishing
children are
things?
not good for focus.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
but
someone had told me this earlier.
Michael, you are welcome to
uh,
come and take mine if you
uh,
need an excuse at any point in time. uh,
so
being able to stay focused, like not, being able
yeah.
to reach those goals, having the discipline to stick with it.
So is that how I should kind of think about this? This is like a discipline and follow through sort of measure.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Like, do you succumb to shiny object syndrome? Do you have the discipline to follow through? I think that's a great way of looking at it.
And then the last was social indifference.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. This is the keeping up with the Joneses. You know, do you do you have a propensity to, I don't want to say falling for it because that sounds judgmental, but falling for advertisements, social media? You're scrolling through Instagram and you see this really great skincare product and you're like, oh, I gotta have that. Do you need the
Okay.
latest and greatest?
Okay.
Um,
So okay, so if I'm high on social indifference, I am very indifferent to what others are doing. So like this is the I don't care about the Joneses. They can live their life.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to live
High
mine.
on this one is
So high is
there.
good on
Yeah.
this one. You want to be indifferent in this context. It means you don't care about the Joneses and what they bought recently.
Correct. Yes. Yes. That would be accurate.
So it sounds like it's true actually for all of these, like more frugality, more focus, more confidence. Like all of these are basically higher scores will be good across these dimensions.
Yes, that is true. Yeah.
So on the one hand, I get it. Like clients go through this, and I've got some sense as to their wealth building tendency or style. I feel like there's some weird self selections that given that a lot of us work with people who have already accumulated some level of wealth, like that's why you have assets to manage for our advisory firm to work with you on a holistic basis. I feel like there's some implied self selection bias of like if you made it to my office, you probably are good at a lot of these unless you happen to inherit it from someone. Uh, that like our clients are going to tend to score above average just because they got to the point that they could be our clients. But just I'm struck that I feel like if you are my client, you probably score pretty well in these in the first place, unless I'm specifically an advisor that like works with younger clientele earlier in their careers who maybe really have not translated good incomes into wealth yet, and we're trying to figure out whether they're going to be able to do that or whether they're going to be challenged to do that.
Yeah, there probably is to a degree. Some of this, these questions here asking around like thoughts and like feelings and kind of the emotional aspect. And sometimes that may not translate quite to the behavioral side of things. And that can be
Okay.
good or not. And so, I've certainly seen where clients from a financial, their net worth statement, if you were to look at it, it all looks well and good and quote unquote healthy. It looks fine. However, when they go to maybe take these two particular like assessments, there are scores that may not be quite as desirable. And look, here's the thing, like that can be okay. Some of it's just creating some awareness for the client advisor. And, the feedback, at least from the client side, is usually generally pretty positive of like, oh, wow, like this makes a lot of sense. And particularly when I have couples do this, there tends to be, a lot greater understanding of each other. Hopefully that's usually the goal, right? And it really helps to kind of build that financial intimacy, but certainly overall just intimacy. And it also shines some light into like, hey, these are, from an awareness place, just things to be mindful of.
Well, I am struck, particularly in the context of couples, that you get a much better understanding where, I would say, where both of them are, like where each of them are, than you might just otherwise get in working with couples, where there tends to be someone who is the bigger driver of the relationship of the two, which now, as I'm relating back to the earlier discussions, like because the other one might literally be a money avoider, which is why that spouse never comes to the meetings,
Correct.
because he or she is literally a money avoider, which means I don't really have any sense of what's going on in the other half of this couple, that maybe now I get more perspective on what might be going on in their couple's dynamics around money behind the scenes, if I can at least get the money avoider to take the script and validate their own avoider, but then also find out what their building wealth factors are like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and, too, I know this might, I don't really mean this to tangent up a conversation, but when you're looking at just the statistics kind of around widows, and if you're working with stereotypically a male partner and their wife is not involved, we're talking heterosexual couples here, their wife isn't involved, and then the husband passes away, and if maybe they've been an avoider, but if there's not that understanding or relationship factor there, like that client's more likely to go find another advisor. And so, these assessments kind of, they're helpful for the clients, but also for the advisor, really, and, trying to create better relationships, maintain the relationships.
Well, I almost feel like, well, as you noted earlier, we as advisors probably skew heavily towards the money vigilance end, because advisor, uh, maybe I'm over projecting a little, but I even feel like clients that we work with probably have a tendency where at least one of them is money vigilance oriented, because it's the vigilance and the forward looking thought that makes them want to hire a
Yeah,
financial
you're right.
advisor
Yeah.
to help. But at the same time, like if both of them were high vigilance and very comfortable with this, they probably would be DIYs. So,
Yeah.
there to me, there's almost sort of an implication of one's probably vigilant and one's probably not, and you're probably going to be working with the vigilant one and not working with the one who's not, which means at best your relationship with the other spouse might look very different than your relationship with the spouse that primarily engaged you, in ways that you probably won't have much perspective on because they haven't engaged you, which is where tools like this become relevant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are couples typically different or typically the same? Like, do birds of a feather flock together on these measures, or is this more of an opposites attract thing?
I'd say both. I see more opposites
Okay.
than,
Darn.
no,
I feel like
well,
the birds of a feather would have been a little easier to manage from a client perspective.
yeah,
Uh,
well, I mean, there probably are, and some of this might tie maybe more into the values piece, which, is different than what these assessments here are looking at. But, from a values aspect, we tend to be attracted to, a mate, if you will, that shares a similar value set that we do. I see where couples oftentimes have, a lot of similarities there, and that's really what keeps them in it, but these beliefs, the behaviors, I see it's not uncommon that I see someone who is vigilant with someone who is avoidant. That seems to be a very common pairing.
Right, which would make sense, right? Delegation of responsibilities amongst the couple.
Right.
Sure. Except
Yeah.
highlights well, like, well, that in and of itself would probably be a pretty big explainer of why, when the primary person you are working with, the money vigilant one, passes away and the wealth moves to the money avoider, that it might be hard to retain this relationship, not because we didn't do a good job of trying to include the other spouse, because they're literally a money avoider. Like, this was going to be hard.
Right. I do think that that is where, what my role really is and can be in a firm, if is really helping to bridge that gap there. Obviously, if that is something that the firm and to a degree the client wants, but being that one that can really help to bridge that gap to maybe opening up or softening, if you will, that money avoider and helping them engage and be more a part of that process. One of the aspects that I do help firms with is the engagement piece, and from a more so from a communication standpoint, and that talking about money avoiders, like partners who are money avoidant, like that's exactly where that of feedback, offering, coaching, that I provide can really be helpful for, so that you are retaining that client. And it's not really about retaining. I know that our advisors kind of get wrapped up in like retention. It's really not about retention, but it's really optimizing and helping the client create a life well lived. And that's both parts, not just the money vigilant one.
So, so the other question I have around both building wealth and money scripts, can I change these? Like, as an advisor, like, I mean, are these hardwired traits, like you are what you are, and I just got to deal with the fact that one of you is an avoider and the other one of you is vigilant, and like one of you is really social indifferent and the other one's not. Uh, are these just the cards that I'm dealt as the advisor, or can I actually like change these? Do people's scores change over time?
I love that you asked that. And, I guess the answer is yes. So, yes, these can be shifted and changed. Now, I think some realistic expectations here are, probably need to be made. The likelihood of, let's just say, a money avoider completely getting rid of all of their avoidance and moving, to the dark side and becoming extremely money vigilant, probably not
Right.
maybe to that extreme of a degree, but yes, these scripts, these wealth factors, yes, they can be changed over time, and in fact, I have seen them changed. It requires a lot of work and effort, and this is where advisors, they don't have the time to put in from a behavioral standpoint, a coaching standpoint, they may not have the time to, put this kind of or level of work in that may, for some clients, be needed. Again, I point back to like that is some of my role, for firms, is helping, some of those clients. But yes, these scripts, these wealth factors, these aspects, they can be changed.
And I guess just be clear, so like these are assessments that come from data points. Like, you use them as part of your overall work, but advisors can also just literally like go to data points and do these themselves if they want to, if they're interested.
Correct. Yes, they can sign up for their own subscription through data points and administer these client assessments, for themselves. I hope it's maybe okay to share that. Here probably by the time this goes out, I will be partnering actually with data points to offer some of these feedback, like coaching sessions for advisors on these assessments that data points offers. So they can go in and subscribe and get a subscription. There will be several other subscription levels there that include coaching, or I call them money mindset, but they'll be called the trove coaching around the results of these money mindset assessments.
So now take us through some of the other areas that you had talked about. So I'm understanding money mindset meetings now. Like, I think you said that you do other things of just like helping advisors with their onboarding process. So is there other, I guess, like other stuff you do with onboarding beyond this, or is this the focus of how you help advisors with the onboarding process?
No, beyond just the money mindset meetings for onboarding, we also look at what is your onboarding process and what are your goals for it. For a lot of or for the firms that are really bringing me on, like they have this desire to really, implement aspects of financial psychology or, create, what is kind of being called more of a human first approach. And so looking at the onboarding process from prospect meeting all the way to plan delivery, or even, it's not part of onboarding, but, I know, Dr. Megan Lertz, like she talks about rediscovery, like the rediscovery meeting process, like looking at those aspects of the offering and how can we, adjust, shift, tweak, add, to make them more aligned with the firm's values or overall goal. How can we make them better for the clients?
Okay. So just help me understand further, like the difference between what is like what you do and what you're talking about here versus just like what advisors do in general, right? I mean, I think most of us, like, we have a goal of the onboarding process to onboard our clients. Like, we got to get to know them and understand their situation, and we're trying to craft and deliver a financial plan. Like, what things are you doing or talking about that's different or beyond that?
So I'm helping really them look at more of the human part of it. So, what information do you need to know about the human that's going to help you to be able to, at least in the onboarding, create, a solid plan for them. So that might include, a values exercise, asking about their values or their vision. If it's a couple that you're working with, at least what is the joint vision there? What are the stress points? For this individual or couple, how do they respond and react to market turns? What are some of those emotional behavioral responses during maybe other times of stress? So looking at the psychological factors there that speak to who this client is as a human and what it will be like or may be like to work with them.
So the idea is this is like a list of additional questions you might give me that I'm going to ask in, I guess, either my prospect meeting or my discovery meeting, depending on when I want to open the door on some of this.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's also some just conversation around like how successful are you with your prospect meetings? What is the, close ratio on that? And what's your goal with it? If it's we want it to be better, then let's look at it, how we can improve that and make it better. There's, the aspect too of really creating a client avatar and trying to understand who is your ideal client and what is their profile here. What is it that they're struggling with? How are they thinking, about their financial health, their financial well-being, and how can we really understand, that ideal client in a deeper way so that maybe the firm's marketing team can create great marketing material, or maybe the advisor can speak to that during the prospect meeting a little bit better in a way that resonates with that prospect.
So it sounds like this isn't necessarily like about changing kind of my sequence of meetings or cadence of meetings. Like, I'm gonna have my prospect meeting or my initial discovery meeting or my plan presentation meeting. This is more about what things are you doing in those meetings? What questions are you asking in those meetings? Do you need other tools or assessments in the meetings to show up a little bit differently than others? Is that
Yeah,
a
it
good way to
is.
think about it?
Yeah. And, thinking about too, like how you as the advisor, how are you showing up? And this again might be pretty nitpicky, but like what are the behavioral cues that you're giving off? How are you showing up physically? How's your body language? Being able to also read signs of prospects from an awareness place. So if you're talking too much, like having the awareness to know like you're talking too much and you should probably stop if you would like this client to sign on with you.
So
So
per
some
the
coaching there
yeah.
too.
So per the supervision discussion earlier, like are you coming into my prospect meeting to sit second chair and literally like observe this in person? Am I supposed to record this? Or are we like hoping I do these meetings over Zoom and we can get a Zoom recording? Like how are you getting to the kind of feedback that you would
Yeah,
need to speak to something like body language and missing physical cues?
I'm not sitting in on
Okay.
prospect meetings, and um, mm, maybe there would be a place where that's appropriate, but no, some of this is getting feedback from the advisor. So, I understand that there is, some self-report bias that could be there, but usually, at least the ones that I'm working with, there's a desire there to be and do better, and
Right.
already a little bit of awareness around, hey, I probably don't do this well. I probably don't smile a lot or come across as very warm. Can you help me with that? So there's usually some level of awareness already there. So no, I'm
Right.
not
That,
sitting in
that's
on
why
those.
I'm engaging for help. Like
Correct.
I've got some
Yes.
cognizance this probably isn't going quite like I would like. And if I've been around on this earth long enough, I probably have some general indication in life of maybe I don't come across as the warmest, or maybe I have some awkwardness, or whatever it is. It's probably not news to you.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. There's some really cool like new research out there that shows that smiling can really alter the perception of the viewer. And so, just being able to have, body language that speaks warmth and invites clients to want to open up and share and speak with you is crucial for not just, landing a prospect, but, really for a long term relationship. So, some coaching and kind of education just on what that is. And if the advisor wants even just kind of some role play, there too.
Interesting. And so I'm envisioning this is more of there's like a coaching and consulting aspect to this if
Correct.
we're literally going through like what are your meetings and how do you show up in them?
Right. Yes,
W-
exactly. I would love to be able to get to a place where meetings may be recorded and, I offer feedback after viewing them. That's something that I've kind of delicately like put out there into the world. Again, I know I'm coming from a field of mental health where recording our sessions is very commonplace. Um,
Yeah,
but
very not common in our world.
correct,
Just like
right.
as a default, like that's not a
Yeah,
standard thing in the advisor world.
right. I recognize that, like, I totally recognize that. However, there is a tremendous amount of value in being able to go back and watch yourself, through a different lens.
So, I'm curious for a moment in that direction. So I feel like from the advisor end, well, yeah, fundamentally, there's two primary challenges to recording my client meeting with the prospect, or like my approach meeting with the prospect. The first problem is me, and the second problem is the prospect.
Sure.
So, right, part of this is okay. Am I actually ready to have myself recorded and get what may or may not be the feedback that perhaps I need to hear, but I got to make sure I'm ready to hear it. Sorts of moments, right? I can envision a lot of people going through their heads of just, oh, I don't know if I'm really ready to actually be
Yeah,
recorded
yeah, yeah.
and get all that critique at once. Uh, and then there's the part of, well, is it going to be awkward to the prospect? Like, presumably, I need to explain and disclose it to them. They got to agree to be recorded. Is that a weird thing to ask in a meeting? But I'm like, part of me is chuckling as I say that because in the advisor realm where we're not used to this, I feel like it's a potentially awkward thing to say. Probably a little bit easier in a digital world because more of us record on Zoom, but like feels really strange in person.
Right.
Except therapists do this in person frankly talking about things that are typically more sensitive than even what we tend to talk about as financial advisors. So how do therapists open this conversation of, would it be okay if we record this meeting, this therapy meeting where you're maybe talking about really sensitive things? Like, how do you get your patients comfortable? Because I feel like if you can get your patients comfortable, we should really be able to get our clients and prospects comfortable.
Yeah, from a simplistic kind of place, I use an approach that I call help me help you. Help
Okay.
me to help you. Are you willing to allow me to record our session so that after we are done, I can go back and
Oh.
review it and be able to critique either just me or a peer, or mentor, and so that I can become a better clinician. And some of the other, aspect kind of this too that I talk about with clients. I supervise pre-licensed clinicians now currently, and so I help to kind of coach them on how to talk about this with clients. But there is an aspect here of when you're in the meeting. Hopefully, usually, you're very present in that meeting, and if you are even working with an individual, it can happen, but certainly if you're working with a couple, there's a lot that is going on. It may not seem like it if there's silence, but there's a lot that is going on. You're balancing, in this instance, several relationships: the relationship with yourself, the relationship with partner A, with partner B, and the relationship between partner A and B. So there's a lot going on, and it's easy to miss things in that place. And so one of the things I talk about with clients is, hey, there's two of you, you know, I can miss a lot of things. I can be focused on one thing and then be missing something that maybe you said because I was focused on this thing. And recording is really a way of helping me to be able to go back and kind of examine everything that was said while I'm not caught up in the moment there. I find that this generally goes over very well. In fact,
I like that.
I can't recall at all a single instance off the top of my head. I'm sure there has been. It's been 15 years, but I can't recall a single time where a client has gone, you know what? No, I really don't want to help you do that. That sounds terrible. I'm not really willing to do that at all. Generally, the feedback is quite positive. It's like, wow, yeah, like you care a whole lot about helping me, that you're not only willing to sit in on this meeting, but you're willing to spend another hour like examining this and learning from it. Like, heck yeah, I'm on board for that.
I like that framing. I like that framing. So, so what else, just as you've now gone through a lot of different advisors and their prospect meetings and their discovery meetings, their plan meetings, like what else do you find that we're missing, that you end up spending time teaching and training and trying to adjust and improve upon? Where else
Yeah,
do you see our gaps?
the biggest gap is really in self work. And this is huge in the mental health space. Now, I'm not saying that clinicians and therapists are always good about doing it, but there is an aspect that being a practitioner, we have to know ourselves well, and we have to also be actively working on ourselves. And I find that in the advisory space, and I can see where some of this is starting to change, a little bit. There's pockets here and there, but really doing your own work. That doesn't mean you have to go to therapy. I'm not saying that every advisor has to go and start therapy here, but really being willing to examine where are your own blind spots, where are your biases, where what's your relationship with money. So if an advisor is particularly anxious about a certain, financial aspect, in their own personal, life, they can unintentionally or inadvertently like project that onto their client. I see this crop up a lot with relationships. So if a client reminds them of somebody, maybe from their past or their
Hmm.
mom or an ex, uh, they may unknowingly really, kind of start to relate or act in a way that is not authentic. It's true. They're kind of acting more from a past standpoint. There's a term we use called countertransference in therapy. And it's, really kind of putting the face of someone else on the client and responding that way to them. Being able to do your own kind of work and have some awareness around that ensures, well, I shouldn't say ensures, that may not be fair, but it helps to at least minimize some of that occurrence.
Okay, and so the idea is like just trying to become more aware that I might be doing that might be cropping up, or I guess getting to the earlier comments, like, going through myself and finding out that, like, yes, I'm high money vigilance, maybe saw that coming, but like, okay, but you are high money vigilance and not everybody you work with is. So like,
Correct.
let's reflect for a moment how a not money vigilant client might not see some of the advice you're giving because they just don't have that script in the first place.
Correct. I think maybe another or different, like non-therapist-y way of maybe saying that is, being able to dig in and understand, like if you get triggered by certain clients, like from a personality standpoint.
Mm,
So, I kind of offered a super therapist-y kind of way of explaining it, but like on a basic level, maybe how another way is like understanding what your triggers are. What type of people trigger you? How do you respond to them? If that one client really just gets under your skin, why do they get under your skin? Examining that so that, you don't end up responding to them maybe in a way that is not providing, great service, to them.
that, that that was a kind way to put
Yes, there you
it.
go.
So So then what does this cost? Like, how does it work for firms that you work with and engage around all of this, of the money mindset meetings and facilitations and office hours and like, hack my uh uh onboarding process apart and help you rebuild it?
Yeah, so I offer a monthly rate for a certain, X number of hours per quarter. So it's, for example, it's 10 hours per quarter for $1,000 a month or $3,000 a quarter. If you want to think of it that way. So, and then it goes up
And
in increments from there based on hours.
with base like breakpoints, if I buy more than 10 hours a month and or 10 hours a quarter, this gets to be a better deal.
Correct. The hourly rate then becomes less. Exactly.
Okay. And so you said, so the base is 10 hours per quarter is $3,000 per quarter.
Correct. And that's physical hours time. Certainly there's email exchange that goes into that, kind of as well. I
Okay.
try to be available to answer questions outside of physical hours.
And and mechanically, like, people have to hire you at least a quarter at a time. That's just kind of scope of engagement.
Yeah, I ask for a minimum of a 6-month initial engagement.
Okay.
So 6 months, and that's some of that is because if we're talking, well, let's just say 20 hours, like takes a little bit to get to know each other
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like a relationship. So
Yeah.
minimum 6-month engagement, and then it goes up
Okay.
to 12-month engagement from there.
Okay. And and then I'm assuming that kind of scopes out to the firm of like, am I going to use those hours mostly for you to do mindset meetings with my clients, or are we going to use a big chunk of that because I just want you to overhaul my onboarding process and give me new questions to ask?
Yeah. So, if it's just a project of, like you said, just doing an onboarding overhaul, like, yeah, that might just be a one-time kind of 6-month project. But, at least the firms that I've currently been, working with, it's more than just that. There's monthly office hours or, depending, there's client meetings, things like that. So, yeah.
Okay. So, uh, so what surprised you the most about going this path of trying to build a like big consulting business around behavioral finance, or could building this for fractional financial behavior officer model?
Well, I think what surprised me the most was that anyone would sign up for it. Tru- Truth be told,
Sign of the times, we're making progress. This I don't think this would have gone as well 20 years ago.
no, yeah, very, very surprised. Like, I guess that there is an appetite. Although maybe I'm not giving myself entirely enough credit here, but it's the overwhelming just support has also been amazing. And granted, look, I know I probably live in my social network, social, connection, professional network is maybe a little bit more kind of in this bubble here, but just the overwhelming support that I've, received from a lot of different people has been surprising, but incredibly validating. So yeah.
So what were you doing previously before you moved in this like direction and line of work?
So I've been operating my own clinical practice for, I guess May is a decade. So since 2014, I've been practicing as a clinician though for almost 15 years, but started my own private practice in 2014, just after my second child was born. So prior to this, role, this offering, I've been a traditional couples therapist, seeing 20, 25 clients a week, operating, having a solo operation. 2019 is probably when I discovered, really financial therapy. And that came about really because I had a lot of couples sitting on my couch that, were talking about a lot of financial issues. The other aspect here too is that, with Clayton being a CFP, maybe I have a little bit more of an ear for some of those
Yeah.
financial issues cropping up too. So, but started to really find myself kind of in this place of like, man, I need like better tools because I don't know how to help these couples, and sending them to an advisor is not just the answer for a lot of these. So
So
2019, I
so
started.
where do you go for tools?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So actually 2019 is funny because, started kind of thinking a lot more thoughtfully around how do I learn? How do I grow? And I remember Clayton and I, we had a conversation. We called Christy Archuleta, never met her, never talked to her, and was asking her about kind of financial therapy. And I think at the time she had just moved to UGA, and she was telling me all about Kansas State's financial therapy program and how great it was, and like the certificate, getting certified. And I was like, that sounds like my jam. Like that sounds like exactly what I need. Um, 2020 came, COVID hit, and needless to say, March 17th was the last time that I saw clients in person at my office. I say my office, my original office. And I stayed home with our kids for 10 months and drastically had to readjust. And you talk about pivoting. I had to learn technology, learn how to run a virtual practice, legal stuff, ethical, HIPAA, all of that. And
Oh,
it
right,
took a
because you've got a whole like medical services overlay to let's start meeting on Zoom now.
absolutely. And, technology wasn't caught up with that at the time. So, 2020 came and it absolutely derailed any hopes, aspirations for really, you know, putting my foot to the pedal and pursuing, at least educationally, financial therapy in the form of a graduate certificate. So that was a really, as I know it was for most, I'm not saying anything new here. I know so many people struggled with that, but that was a struggle and felt very lost for a while.
I was
Very
gonna
lost for a while.
I was gonna ask like what the low point has been on this journey.
Yeah, that the 2020 timeframe probably, was I had this kind of tug and pull, maybe even before that, of like, I don't just see myself as a therapist and I don't want to just do therapy for the rest of my life. There's a burnout factor. You hear, the worst of humanity for 25 hours a week, 50 weeks a year for, at least at that point, it had been 10 years. And, it starts to take a toll on you. Um, Not to mention you're in the midst of a pandemic
Yeah.
and the chaos and uncertainty from that. And it was hard. I can say that there were positives in that. The time I got with my kids was something, I would never give up. That part was amazing. But professionally, as someone who is very ambitious and who has, quote unquote, always known what I've wanted and wanted to do, professionally speaking, it was lonely. It was a very, very low point for me from a mental health standpoint.
So now that you've gone so far down this road of financial therapy, financial behavior work with advisory firms, like what do you know now you wish you could go back and tell you 5+ years ago in 2019 when you were starting this shift?
I used to look for these external factors or signs or kind of explain it like a compass. Like I felt like at the time I was really looking and trying to find my own compass. And I've come out of that place realizing that I am the compass. I am the one, we talk about from the building wealth assessment, kind of control and internal versus external locus of control, and realizing that I am really the one that determines my own success. And I have everything. There's a degree of privilege. Certainly, I recognize that, but I really do have the ability, means, capability, resources, grit, resilience within me to create my own path. And so if I could go back, I probably would offer that perspective and a heck of a lot more grace and compassion, um, to myself during that time. Everything is figure outable. I have that quote next to my coffee pot in our kitchen. It says everything is figure outable, and I wish I'd believed that during that time.
So for advisors that want to go deeper into this realm themselves, like what advice would you give I guess like a younger, newer advisor trying to be more financially behaviorally savvy in building their careers from here?
Yeah, first I would probably validate, like, give them just the affirmation of, like, "That's amazing. I think that's great," and biased or not, like, I think that is, an honorable pursuit to try and do. So that's kind of my initial therapist-y, like, gut response, and then, the second part of that is, really diving into the education piece. It doesn't have to be formal through like a university, but, invest in learning about yourself, not just the, numbers and, the tax part and all these other financial, kind of concepts, but, also learning like how to do the emotional skills better. I don't like to say soft skills, so I'm working really hard not to
Mhm.
say soft skills because that is a phrase that really burns me. A colleague of mine, Andy Wren, she calls them diamond skills because they're incredibly hard, to learn. But really investing in learning how to do those better, while seeking out just further reading and education on the behavioral part.
So you kind of said like you don't have to go the formal education route. Where do you go if you do want to? So I'm just
Yeah,
a lot of folks who listen, like we have a lot of people with a lot of letters after their name who enjoy those types
sure.
of learning paths. Like where do you go if you actually really want to go deep and nerd out on this?
Yeah, Kansas State, they've got the financial therapy graduate certificate. I am proud to say that the University of Georgia, I am located here in the state of Georgia, but the University of Georgia has recently also launched a financial therapy graduate certificate program, as well. And so educationally, I think that those are two, great places. Texas Tech, I know from a research standpoint, as well. Those are some great, kind of more formal education places that advisors can look to or research and look into.
So as we wrap up, just this is a podcast about success, and one of the themes that comes up is just the word success means very different things to different people. And so you're on this wonderful journey of building the successful fractional financial behavior officer business, like this new thing that we haven't had in the industry. And so you're building successfully on the business end. How do you define success for yourself at this point?
Yeah, those are, metrics that are probably more, emotionally, I guess, driven. So, how I define success is, really the quality of my own mental, emotional well being, along with my physical health. That's, serving as a role model to my kids and ensuring that I'm here for the long haul. There's a physical health component there, but success is that for me. It's having good relationships. It's making sure that my kids still want to hang out with me and don't completely hate me when they get to be adults. Along with, being a great wife as well. Like those are my markers for success. There's certainly the business part, but the relationships for me, if I have those, then, I really have everything.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us on the Financial Advisor Success Podcast.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Want even more ideas, tools, and resources on how to break through to the next level of success as a financial advisor? Check out the leading financial planning industry blog, Nerd's Eye View, at www.kitsis.com, where Michael covers the latest practice management trends and financial planning strategies. And by joining the members section, you can earn IMCA and CFP continuing education credits, along with exclusive member content. Get it all now at www.kitsis.com.